Hey everyone, it's Lily, and on June 2nd, Corey Shepard Stern, the executive producer of Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Secrets, did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit about the production and just some background questions. And I know that a lot of you guys like my AMA rundowns. This one, I'm just more going to give you kind of what I found interesting rather than commentary on it, but hope you enjoy this video. Okay, so here's the first question I thought was kind of interesting. Someone asks about Paul and Morgan, and if you don't remember Paul and Morgan from the documentary, they're like the young couple who was kind of portraying like the new Christian influencers like online, and they were interviewed for about 3 minutes. I can't really remember, and some of their clips were shown, and they got I'm gonna admit they didn't come off the best. But they made some videos, and they kind of said we felt like the documentary was one-sided, first of all, which, I mean, I guess when you're thinking about documentary making, I think this is probably a controversial opinion, but it was a little one-sided, I will say, but I think that the producers kind of had more of a focus on just letting victims tell their story in the way that they wanted to. But Paul and Morgan were also upset because they felt like, you know, we talked to you guys, you told us that we were going to be portrayed in one way, and we were portrayed in another, we feel betrayed. So, with that said, someone asked, are you aware kind of Paul and Morgan's reaction to the finished documentary? And she says, yeah, that she's aware. She never wanted anyone to feel like they'd been treated unfairly, and that they even excluded some clips of their YouTube work that might have been even more uncomfortable in the edit. She said, I've heard maybe they complained about not having more screen time, and that we gave Deanne and Mark from Lula Rich tons of space to tell their side of the story, which, for context, if you don't know, Corey also was in charge of the Lula Rich documentary. Now, in all fairness, from watching the Paul and Morgan video, and I could be wrong, but I thought that they were more complaining about they wanted screen time for like the gospel and for like people to be able to say, hey, like the IBLP sucks, but I still kept like my Christianity, which is kind of where Ginger Bola was going with her book. So I don't know if they necessarily wanted themselves more screen time. That could have been totally true. I think that they were kind of shocked by the little amount of screen time they got, because I think that they said that they were on camera for 4 hours. But at the end of the day, if you want my personal opinion, I think Paul and Morgan are being extremely dramatic. Like, I don't know. I think if I was Paul and Morgan and somebody asked me to be in a Duggar IBLP documentary, first of all, wouldn't do it. I wouldn't be in a documentary in any way, because I wouldn't do something where I couldn't add the final edit. But I would know that it's probably not going to go well for you. But, I can understand if they were told one thing and then they got another, but I just feel like they're being a tad dramatic, as they often do. Okay, so someone asked, hi, love the documentary, blah, blah. How were people selected to be interviewed, and how many hours of interviews were there to edit? We've speculated quite a bit. So many hours of interviews, she says, probably 8 per person at the minimum, and many more than that for some others. The people were selected through Zoom pre-interviews and tons of advanced research. Olivia Chris, one of the directors/EPs and the originator of the project, reached out to so many before she even pitched our company, and then we took it to our partners at Cinemart or Sidemart, don't know how to say that. Others just came from research. Lots of late nights and Googling, which is how I found Brooke Arnold, which is one of the the IBLP victims who actually met with Gothard. Alex Harris, he was talking about the Joshua generation. Kristen Cobes Dumez, she was one of the professors, I believe. And Heather Heath, which was another one of the victims. Someone asked, did you know the Dillards were writing a book when they filmed? She said, no, found out when everyone else did, which I kind of gathered from her comment section. She had some people that seemed like her personal friends who were like shocked in the comments, and she was like, ha ha ha, kept it a secret. So I feel like she wasn't really telling anyone, like they kind of kept it under wraps. Someone said, if the series were longer, what would you have liked to expand on? She said, so much. Joshua generation, ADF, character first, prison, so like Gothard's prison ministries, educational neglect, and responsible homeschooling, the movement by many former Joshua generation to pull away from dominionism and their belief that Jesus didn't cause believers to be in that realm, but to only love their fellow humans. Go talk to Alex Harris. Oh man, so many more things. So yeah, I noticed, this is kind of like a tangent, but I noticed a lot of people felt like the Joshua generation part in episode 4 was kind of, didn't fit in as well. So I think that it's an interesting topic, but yeah, I think more time would be really cool to look into that. How do we connect the jump between the educational neglect of homeschooling to the Joshua generation attending institutions like Harvard and Oxford? How do they even get into places like the Senate and Supreme Court, clerking without the usual connections like nepotism, elite private schools, etc.? And then she says, I wanted to cover this. Thank you. I'll make this quick. First, not everyone homeschooled experiences educational neglect. But many did. Patrick Henry College, aka Harvard for homeschoolers, they have so many connections, more than almost anyone trying to get those internships. They win at moot court every year over places like Princeton. Many smart people go there, even if they've had early educational deficits. Please dive into this school. If you haven't, go watch the scripted film about them that they made on YouTube, where a male student comes up with the winning argument for how to defeat Roe versus Wade, featuring Mike Ferris. PhD students do go into many political jobs. Chillingly to me, there's a pipeline through their national security program right into the FBI, CIA, Homeland Security. Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of felt like there was a disconnect between the topic of educational neglect in the series and then going into Joshua generation. Also, a lot of people, I think, felt like the inclusion of the Joshua generation was like it felt a little bit weird within the series. I personally understood what they were trying to say. I don't know how y'all feel about that. Did the team ask any other Duggar family members to be in the documentary? She says, we did try to reach out to as many as possible. We wanted to allow everyone to tell their own story. Jill and Amy and Deanna were the ones that responded. We were thrilled. So yeah, a lot of people were kind of like talking about Ginger and how she wrote a book, but she would never be in this documentary. Personally, like I do agree with a lot of people that she probably did want to make money off her book, but honestly, like I understand why Ginger wouldn't want to be a part of this documentary. As I said before, I wouldn't do anything where I didn't have final cut. So I mean, I absolutely agree. Ginger was probably trying to make some money, and she's like interested in that, and that's her own prerogative. But I also like think that it probably came into account that you're not gonna know how you're gonna look and how maybe what you're saying could be kind of distorted or um, taken out of context, or not everything that you want to put in there is in there, not what you want to focus on. The caveats you put in there aren't entered into there. So I totally understand why Ginger declined. Hi Corey, how did you guys decide to include Paul and Morgan? Would you have also included Girl Defined, MMA? I think that they're talking about MMA Jenkins and Joe Rodriguez. Also, how did you guys react to the restraining order that Bobby Holt has against her ex-husband, Jim Holt? She said, I'm pretty sure that Joe Rodriguez passed. I wish that she would have, confirmed if she did or not, because that's actually really interesting information. We didn't include more than Paul and Morgan because we needed to try to stay tightly focused on a small cast so viewers could get to know them. The restraining order. We support survivors, period. I assume that took a huge act of bravery. I think, unfortunately, Shiny Happy People shows clearly what happens when misogyny is taught as a basic principle of life, and it takes a lot to leave even the worst situation. Okay, so some people, in the beginning, in the first few days after the documentary came out, were kind of like, I wonder if Jill Rodriguez knows that she was, featured in this documentary. Because, you'd think she'd get a comment or something, but I believe she has her comments disabled on Instagram, and it's, friends only on Facebook. So unless, she's just, reading her message requests, I don't think that, she would know. But after kind of what she posted, it was like on Instagram. It was like a bunch of the kids were like kneeling by it might have been a bed or a table, and then she was talking about how she really appreciated her upbringing and that some people are like too dramatic about um like criticizing their upbringing. She definitely knows that at least the documentary exists. Um, I wonder if she knows like her clip was in there, because I remember there was like an AMA, um, and the person was talking about how they were a babysitter, and Jill like did not know about Reddit, which I just don't. I get that, like, I just don't believe it. I think that she knows like more than we think she knows for sure. She just doesn't care because it's like her ministry to be on Facebook or whatever. And as for like the Bobby Holt situation, I've just tried not to like talk about it too much because I don't know why, like, some things feel like more personal than others, but I hope she's well. I guess that's all I'll say for now. So this question is like really worded strangely. It says, "Who were some of the people you ask for an interview that declined?" Um, so I don't know if this person is asking like who were people you asked to be in it that declined, or that they asked to be in it and they declined. And she says Bill Gothard. I think it would be absolutely like weird to have Bill Gothard like included. I get that they did like the Lula or whatever, and they talked to like the founders of the company, but I feel like Bill Gothard is like a literal, like, not literal criminal because he's never been charged with anything, but he's just like such a like evil figure that it's like, can we put him, like, give him this platform to speak even? But it would also just be like absolutely crazy if he asked himself, like, on the other hand of the wording of this question, if he asked to be a part, like, I could see him doing it, but I could also see him like being so, like, thinking he's so above it. I'm not sure. So, if you've gotten to this part in the video, like, tell me in the comments like what you think that question meant. Like, do you think that she's saying that Bill Gothard asked to be included, or that they asked Bill Gothard to be included? Someone asked, did Jim Bob and Michelle or their agent, and when they say agent, I'm assuming their PR guy, Chad Gallagher, reach out to you? Do you know what their reaction has been? No, we know what you all know. We saw the statement. You did. No idea if they watched it. We did receive a statement that we included at the end. I would assume that. Okay, so I don't know if I think they watched it. I think that Jim Bob probably watched it. I think that he, from what I know of him, like, even in like his books that he wrote with Michelle, the two books, he would talk about and give specific examples of like people, like journalists who have talked about him. I think he like does pay attention to what people say about him. I think he's very concerned about image. I think that most people could agree. Now, for Michelle, do I think Michelle has watched it? I don't know. I feel like if Jim Bob wanted her to watch it, she would watch it. But obviously, like, at the time that they put out the statement, within an hour for sure. Maybe less, maybe a little bit more of the series being released, because you guys remember like the series like came out at this random time at like 8 p.m. Eastern time the day before like it said it was supposed to come out on the website, and they just released it. So obviously they wrote it beforehand. They wrote that statement before they actually watched the documentary. But I'm sure Chad Gallagher watched it, and I think Jim Bob watched it. But as for anybody else, like, I don't know. Maybe some of the older kids watched it. I could see Ginger watching it. I could see maybe let's see. Um, Honestly, I don't know who else would watch it. I could see Jessa hate watching it. I could definitely see that, and like getting pissed off. I feel like she also pays attention to what people talk about when it comes to her. How long have you been wanting to make this documentary? Were there any hurdles in the process to getting it greenlit? We pitched it and it was called The Institute. I kind of like that. I kind of like that name, but I do think that like more people were watching it because it had the Duggar family name in it. We had a great sizzle and pitch deck, and Amazon, our favorite buyer, was considering it, but we got greenlit over a weekend in December 2021 when Duggar Talk exploded. My partner renamed it Shiny Happy People, and I wrote an essay to Amazon called Why Shiny Happy People is the Next Lula Rich, but bigger, about toxic Americana. Okay, so this one has a really long answer, and so I apologize if you can't read it very well, but I'll read this two-part question out in its entirety. The first part of the question is, did you consider anything, including anything about the Bates family or any other Fundy family? And to go on a little personal tangent, I know that, like, when we first heard about this documentary, it was kind of like, oh, the Duggars are going to be covered. We're going to talk about the Plaths. We're going to talk about the Bates. And really, there were, like, clips, and there was, like, a very, very slight few-second mention that the Duggars led to, like, other big families on TLC in particular. But they weren't really directly mentioned, like, in the way that we probably thought they were going to be. And so back to the question. The second part of the question is, did you consider featuring Katie Joy of Without a Crystal Ball? She seemed to be peeved that she wasn't included. Ha ha. And before I get into the answer, I don't like talking about Without a Crystal Ball, but I did decide to include this question. So she said, without a crystal ball answer, we were covering multiple topics and obviously only needed a few experts in each. We chose to prioritize people with lived experience who were also subject matter experts where possible. Brooke, Eve, Alex, who were from fundamentalism backgrounds, but are also writers/experts, for instance. We also wanted to give Jill the space to be an expert on her own lived experience, obviously. We had quite a few amazing Duggar Space experts from Snarktopia. As possibility to cover that topic, we wanted to keep our subject list small enough that the audience would really get to know them over the series. Jen was perfect for us to comment on so many issues in a really thoughtful way, and that said, without taking anything away from the other experts, I think every expert wondered why they didn't get contacted or ultimately chosen. It wasn't anything personal, it's just the nature of making a project like this. Okay, so I'm going to take a break. That's halfway through that answer. I really think, if you think about, like, May of 2022, I think that's, kind of when they started filming, like, the sit-down interviews. Without a Crystal Ball and Fundy Fridays are the only two people on YouTube in particular that I know of that were really big. I know that now we have Down the Rabbit Hole at Midnight, who talks a lot about the Duggars, but I don't think that she was, like, that big at the time or even making videos. She might have been, but I don't think that, I don't know, maybe she's making videos. Who knows? Sorry. Let's get back into the answer. I think it's really hard when you feel you're a deep subject matter expert or you have personally survived something like this, and you aren't the one telling the story when it hits the biggest public forum so far. I have empathy for that. In fact, Brooke, and I hope you don't mind me telling this story, was making her own doc for years. When I called her and said, Hollywood is making this, babe, are you in or out? With my full Hollywood producer voice and cigar, it was heartbreaking for her. This is something so personal that she worked on for so long, and she hadn't finished it yet. She had to make a decision about whether to participate in ours or not. I'm so glad she did, but it wasn't an easy decision. I read something, I wish I could remember who wrote it, who said watching Shiny Happy People is like watching someone else tell your own personal story, but yelling it out loud in their own voice. There are so many stories to tell in this universe and Duggarverse, and I welcome each one. There's no competition here. Not when you're dealing with stories of people's lives and hearts and souls and survivals. Let's tell more, and I really hope Brooke makes hers. Yeah. For all the kind of, like, hullabaloo with Without a Crystal Ball versus the documentary, I think that was a mature response for sure. Someone asked, this is a weird question, but do you know what became of the young boy who was used as the spanking example at the IBLP conference? Has anyone that was featured in a clip but not interviewed reach out to you after the show's release? Wherever that young boy is, I hope he's doing okay. Watching that made me physically ill. She said yes. I can't say more, but he is okay. We have spoken. Someone asked, was Dylan appearing and contributing his commentary condition of Amy agreeing, or just a kindness to have her more comfortable? She says, we're down for whatever makes sense for whoever interviews. They didn't require it. Yeah, I know there was a lot of commentary about how Dylan didn't really add anything, and was likely there for emotional support. Not sure on that for certain, but yeah, he didn't really contribute much, and I think that there was a lot of kind of confusion and commentary on that. Someone asked, "Did you receive any pushback or even threats for making the documentary?" And she said, "Nope, thanks for asking." Someone said, "Do you know much about the unlicensed Christian residential youth homes, like the roll-off homes? One of the kids from my church, IBLP affiliated IFB group, got sent to the Corpus Christi roll-off home, and our youth group visited it. The conditions were terrifying. I'd love to know your thoughts of those kind of places where kids like Josh get sent for therapy under absolutely no regulatory control." She said the roll-off story, holy moly. Yes, and let's talk about the connection between the guy who was the lawyer in the civil case against Gothard and the roll-off story. Why is no one talking about that guy? That's the whole thing. I actually know nothing about this. I know that Josh was sent to like a particular, a couple different IBLP affiliated groups, but I've never heard of like the roll-off home, so that's probably a rabbit hole I should go down. I hope I'm not too late, but can you tell us what Jill said after the public school brainwashing line? There's been a lot of debate if there was a but after that line. So yeah, I think that the obviously this is not a direct quote, but Jill had said something like these people are like afraid of brainwashing in schools, and she's like that can certainly happen, blah, blah, blah. And so Corey says, "Big scoop. Hope this gets voted up. A billion people asked this, so I looked it up. Hope I don't get in trouble for posting a transcript." Jill, "Which is true that those things can happen, but..." Derek says, "But you teach your children to think for themselves too." Jill said, you also have to, yeah, but you have to also, it comes to the point where, and this is the biggest thing, trust in God. What is God leading you to? Yes, you don't throw your kids out to the wolves, and you use some discernment. And I feel like a lot of those parents, and I feel a lot of those parents feel like they are, but I think that also independence is a good thing, and you need to encourage that in your kids. There's more. All intelligent, reasonable commentary from Jill. All right, another question about my queen, Jill Rodriguez. Just kidding. Someone says, "In the montage of influencers, you included a small clip of Jill Rod. She is relatively unfamous compared to some of the others who were shown. Were you familiar with their family already, or how did you choose to include her in the show? Did the Holts give any indication of relationship issues? How were their interactions with each other off camera?" And I mean, definitely Jill Rodriguez is unfamous, like in any other circle than that one Fundy Snark board. Like, she is the queen of that board, but anywhere else, like, people are not going to know who she is. Corey says, "I think it's safe to say I'm highly, highly aware of Jill Rodriguez. If I ever did a scripted version of this world, I'd dive into that source material as inspiration in one swift heartbeat. Come on, Jill passed, as I've said elsewhere." The Holts, "No, not that we could see. But that's how those things work, right? Hashtag support survivors." Honestly, like, Jill is so weird and fascinating and funny and almost like satire, but not satire. She's being serious. That you can't even make something fake that's funnier than the real shit she does, to be honest. Like a scripted series based on Jill Rodriguez wouldn't work. Um, and also, the Holts, I also, like, in interviews that they've done, I also didn't notice any signs. But yeah, I agree. That's kind of how those things work. So someone asked what Corey's faith background was, like, back in growing up and stuff. She said, "Yes, former fundamentalist family of origin, unfortunately very familiar. I don't think she's former IBLP from what I know, but I think that she was like in fundamentalist Christianity or another religion, not sure." All right, this is the last question I'm gonna look at, guys. What were Jill and Derek like in person? Did she seem to submit her headship, or was it really just like talking to normal people? And she says normal people. And I really do think that Jill and Derek, if you talk to them, are probably just like normal people, and you would never suspect that Jill grew up the way she did, just from what I've seen kind of in interviews or videos that she's posted. Um, Yeah.